I don't like the word human resources because resources are to be used and you can abuse of these resources.
I'm your host, Robert Gaines, and we have a very special guest today coming in from Britain. This is Dr. Bruno Cignacco. Thank you so much for joining the Free Time Mastermind Podcast. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much, Robert, for your invite. I'm very well, very honored to be here. Thank you.
We're very grateful to have you. You're a TEDx speaker, which a lot of people have aspirations to be speakers because that gives quite a lot of credibility to the speakers and background. Do you have any tips for people that have that as an aspiration? If you could go back through your experience, what would you recommend?
Yes, I became TEDxer during the pandemic. The beginning of pandemic was very challenging because of the lockdown and so on. But what made me stand out when I became a TED speaker and to be chosen by the TED organization was making a proposal that is unique. Seeing a topic from a unique perspective. This means from your own angle. So what the TED organization wants is to approach a topic from a distinctive perspective. This means giving your view from a very unique angle and also providing storytelling throughout the talk that engage people. Should be, in my view, my modest view should be very clearly engaging. So this means meaningful. Preferably, in my opinion, the topic should be perennial, means topic that don't get outdated very easily. So this means that you can watch the talk and the same principles or the same story will apply, but also the TED Talks should bring about some lessons for the listener, for the viewers, so that they can get not only engaged and follow the story with examples whenever possible, but also they get some takeaways. And also shouldn't be too long. Each organization under the TED umbrella have their own requirement, but generally the advice not to have a talk that is beyond 15 minutes or in some cases of 20 minutes. When I became the speaker, also they send you some tips and training. At that moment was in an app that gave you some ideas on how to develop the topic, how to, for example, make this more engaging.
That's perfect, Dr. Bruno. A lot of people think TEDx or TED is this YouTube thing. No, they've been around since the 1990s. They were really pre-internet. And of course, they really learned to use social media to gain more exposure that way. Now, of course, you've written this fantastic book. I see you've got a copy behind you, The Art of Compassionate Business. Can you give me what that first moment was that made you realize I need to write this book?
Okay, this is a very interesting question. And this was also the topic of the talk because I realized I'm a professor, university professor and business advisor, also on the topic of marketing, more specialized in international marketing. And what I observe is that most of the business books are focused on what the tools such as strategies, tactics, for example, marketing books, they talk about positioning, and the variables, the controllable variables. But what I saw that was lacking a bit in most of the business book is the human side. How you develop a strong, long-lasting relationship with different stakeholders and how you maintain this relationship over time. And what principle, because the subtitle of the book is Main Principle for the Human-Oriented Enterprise. What positive principle you can apply on a regular and practical basis in order to strengthen this relationship over time. This came from an article that I read a while ago that was in Harvard Business Review, that was the human moment. And this article was based on a moment at the office where employees connect to their colleagues on a much more human level, emotional and mental level. And I thought this is an idea worth exploring. And I thought there is not so much about this. There are a few books about customer relationships and also relational marketing, but they're technical and theoretical, and they're very difficult to understand. But for most people, we can do something more practical. And I started gathering a lot of scientific papers, books, and I saw that there was a lot of examples, more than that I could imagine, of companies that are successful from the economic perspective, that they have good market share, good brand image, good reputation, increased sales, but also cost. And at the same time, they are human-oriented. This means that they are bringing about a positive difference in people's life. People such as employees, such as customers, community members, suppliers, but also this company going in some cases beyond, and they bring about a positive environmental impact. This means, for example, using renewable sources of energy, using, for example, organic ingredients and so on. And I thought this is quite interesting. There is a book that I read that also inspired me, that is a very well-known book. For example, the connection between generosity and business success, gratitude and business success, the importance of forgiveness in business activities, how to develop a psychologically safe workplace that is obviously characterized by kindness, support, compassion. And the book was published before the pandemic. And then during the pandemic, I observed obviously some very interesting example of companies that were not acting in a human-oriented and companies that were acting in a human-oriented. In these testing times, you can see the two clear categories of companies, the one that are only going for profit and the one that are... And I talked to my publisher that is Rudlis, and they told me, oh, you have new ideas. Do you think that is worth a second edition? The pandemic was about to finish at that moment. And I think that, yes, I can expand, I can include more topics, for example, compassionate leadership, include also the importance of trust in business. I said, go ahead. And also I want to include hundreds of examples of companies that are compassionate and some example of companies that are the one not to emulate, the one that are only focused on profit. So this means the negative example. And they agreed on this. And so, well, I was very happy that it could be published. And then I presented the book all over the world, but what I say that the principle still apply. The principle from the first edition and the second edition apply in a way that maybe we meet in 20 years' time, and this principle can be considered also perennial. Forgiveness, compassion, kindness, support, care, acknowledge an employee's contribution, all these principles will always apply.
That's right.
They're so obvious and so common sense, but many companies in practice don't understand why they need to be applied. And I back all this research with specific sources, scientific sources such as paper, books, and giving a lot of examples on how this apply in practice. So this is, in summary, how this was originated, but I still feel that there is a lot of work to do in a way that the majority of the companies are still acting more or less in a profit-oriented way. And they have, in some cases, specific programs or initiatives that can have a positive social impact and environmental impact, but these are all initiatives. They don't have the view, a paradigm where all their activities, all their decisions, human impact, take into account environmental impact.
Do you think, let me ask this, since you brought up a great point about having a second edition, what was the one main thing that changed between the first edition and second edition? Like you said, the principles never changed, but there has to be probably some new things that you discovered.
Yes, but I observed that I could introduce more cases, specific cases about organization, non-profit organization and business organization that are obviously, they have a human orientation. I introduced some topic like leadership that was before, because there are many books on leadership, and there are different styles of leadership. I wanted to introduce also some new appendices, such as human-oriented leadership. What an example of leaders that are acting in a very caring way, in a supportive way. They can have their position of power, but they can also connect to others in a much more human way. But also what I observed, what drove me to write the new book is this very distinctive categorization of companies, very clear categorization. And if you can say that many companies might get happy because of laying off people, in practice, sooner or later, this will be backfiring the company. And I observe this is a matter of time. You have to be very patient. In some cases, it doesn't backfire the company immediately. But why sooner or later this will backfire, even when the company can be in the short term, or the shareholder might be happy in the short term, or from the short-term perspective? Because in practice, the most important, most fundamental factor in business is the human being. Many people will believe that this technology or this is artificial intelligence or information or even funds. But my research with no doubt concluded, and I agree with other researchers on this point, that the human being is a meta resource, is a resource above all other resources. It's a generator of resources. It's a resource that generates other resources. When you treat well, the human being is capable of developing new products, innovative services, new ways of connecting with customers, new business model, new system, new policy, new technology. So it's limitless. So this means instead the other resources are limited, intrinsically limited. And this is quite important because if you take into account this factor, that the human being is the most important resource, you cannot force this human being to cooperate with your company. But if you treat them well in a caring and supportive manner, you acknowledge their contribution, you are grateful and generous with them, they're on your side spontaneously. You don't have to force them. I don't like a concept. I'm a marketer, so I don't like when some marketer use the concept of customer retention. You cannot retain customer because you can't. They are autonomous. They have their own control.
You're reading my mind, Dr. Bruno, because that was right where I was going. Because it's not just customer retention, and of course we can use a different word, but we're
to all stakeholders. In the book, I separate different stakeholders with different chapters. Apply to employees, apply to customer, apply to partners, business partners, supplier, community members. And what they have in common, all these stakeholders that are human beings. They might have roles, they might have a specific names, a specific function, but they're all human beings that have not only economic needs, but they have emotional needs. They need to be recognized, appreciated, supported, especially during difficult times, but also they have other needs such as mental needs, need for stimulation, need for training, need for developing a new skill, and social need to connect to others. Most companies tend to focus, especially the companies that are profit-oriented, tend to focus only on the economic needs. I pay good salary to this employee, and that's it. This is all done. No, this employee is a human being that they have emotions. They need to be recognized, appreciated, taken care of, especially with difficult times arise. But also, in business, it's very common to use vocabulary that is detrimental to this human orientation. For example, you use human resources. I don't like the word human resources because resources are to be used, and in some cases you can abuse of these resources. So the idea is that I like when some companies use an alternative name, people department. But also, in some cases, companies consider employees as costs. And what you do when you have a financial problem, economic problem, you tend to reduce the cost. So this means, in some cases, employees are like a cog in the organizational machinery that when it's a bit faulty or it's not working well, we can replace. I see many companies that are depersonalizing the stakeholder. This means that they don't treat them as people, but for example, customers are taken into account as a number in the database that will contribute to the company's profit. Some cases, the company doesn't care about customer needs. They care about selling the most expensive product. The salespeople get the highest commission. They're not customer-oriented. Not good, because if you treat people in a disrespectful way, in an unsupportive way, there is a very important law in social psychology that is the law of reciprocity. You treat people in a disrespectful way, what do you expect them? To cooperate with your company, to support your company. You treat customer in a very disrespectful way. What do you expect? To leave positive reviews for your company and product? No, they will do the opposite. Negative reviews, pushing other potential customer away. The same with employees. Employees are, even when they're paid good salary, they are mistreated, they are bullied, they are harassed, they are not recognized, they are exploited in some cases because they have to work long hours with no break. I see many cases here in the UK. What do you expect this employee to be happy? Happy employees bring about happy customers. There is an interesting study that I mentioned in the book that is, when employees are supported on a regular basis, when they are taken care of, when employees are treated in a compassionate way, this means that people in that company understand how they think, how they feel, and try to support them on a regular basis. When these employees are allowed to express their view, their voice, when they are allowed to cooperate with others and act jointly with other employees, this is building what the researchers call a psychologically safe workplace. This work environment brings about higher employee satisfaction, higher customer satisfaction because employees that are highly satisfied are more prone to adopt an attitude of service to our customer because they want to give their best service to this customer. But also, these psychologically safe workplaces tend to bring about lower turnover, lower absenteeism, lower stress level, more productivity, more innovation, and this impact positively on the bottom line. This means that treating people in a kind, supportive way is not only to be nice with them, but it's also to build a strong relationship that will have a positive effect on the company result, a very concrete effect on profit, on market share, on the company's image, and so on. Instead, when you treat people, including employees and customers and other stakeholders, in a disrespectful way, you will find a lot of negative review from customers, negative review from employees in some platforms such as Glassdoor. You will find a lot of negative news about this company in sensationalistic media that they love this type of news. When the company fails, this will be all over the newspapers. And so this will affect your brand image, will affect your reputation, will push away potential high-quality investors, will push away high-talented people that want to work for this company. So sooner or later, not being kind to people, not caring for them, not trying to address their needs that are multidimensional, means economic, emotional, social, mental, not addressing this need fully and not building relationships that are win-win, bring about negative results for this company. It's a matter of time because you cannot cheat on nature. This means that people can only stay in a relationship with the needs of both parties are fully satisfied. If the company satisfies their needs and the employee doesn't satisfy their needs, or the company satisfies their needs and the customer doesn't satisfy their needs in this interaction, employees and customers will run away from this company. It's a matter of time.
How do these larger companies inject compassion at scale? Because for me, if I have a 5-person team, I can read your book, I can get some training, I can create this organization of compassion around me. But what about the companies that are 10, 20,000? What do you recommend to them to increase compassion at scale?
Very interesting. There are many things that companies can do and many things that company can avoid doing. So in many cases, it's more important the thing that they should avoid doing than the thing that should do. Let's talk about first the thing that should avoid doing. In most companies, what we observe, these big companies are very bureaucratic, very rule-oriented or policy-oriented, and this means that everything needs to be done according to regulation. In some cases, the rules are very rigid and they don't adapt to circumstances. But also you see a very clear structure of command and control, and in some cases can lead to micromanaging. So this means that you will have the manager then dictating a specific step to be taken by the subordinate, but don't give any leeway for apply their creativity, their discernment, their experience, their expertise. So the first step is to address anything that could bring about fear in the company. These big companies, I'm not saying all of them, but many of them have what I call pocket of fear. I talk about fear in business, that is a very important topic. Why? What type of fear you can observe in big companies, but also medium-sized and small companies? Fear of employees raising their voice, giving their view, expressing their opinions. They don't, because these companies tend to be very structured because of their size, their volume. Employees, in some cases, they don't have any opportunity to provide with their view, especially related to the day-in, day-out activity that they perform. For example, let's imagine that you are working for the customer service team and the customer are continually complaining. Maybe in these big companies it will be very difficult to make suggestions. In many cases, there are no suggestion boxes that companies provide employees the opportunity to give their ideas, their insight on what is not working. So this means that in some cases, these companies have a very important resistance to change. The things are done this way. They are very traditionally done this way. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to introduce any major change. And if this change need to be introduced, need to be authorized by different levels and so on. In some cases, they are not very adaptive. These companies have, obviously, in some cases, a very clear, what I call a group think. This means that there is a common view of doing things, and then people cannot challenge, cannot dissent, offer any dissent to this. So fear of expressing their voice is very common. The employee don't have channel to express their views, their suggestions, and so on. Fear of being outpaced by colleagues. In many companies, they foster a competitive environment, competitive in a negative way. This means that, let's see who will get the promotion, employee A or B, or let's see who is performing better. This cannot generate trust. This cannot generate a healthy connection with others, generate cooperation. Why? Because you are fearful of being outpaced, outsmarted by your colleague, that you should be sharing resources, working jointly because they complement each other. So also trying to analyze this type of policy that foster a hyper-competitive workplace where people distrust each other, but also fear of being, for example, outpaced by competitors. I see that many companies, especially when you have fewer players in the sector, are continually externally oriented. They are checking what competitors are doing. They launch a new product, we need to launch a new product, or they change the packaging, we have to change the packaging. And when you are extremely externally oriented, you cannot be internally oriented. You cannot develop your own skills, your own capability, developing your employees' natural talents, or training them, or looking for unique ways of developing a new product or a packaging that is more congruent with the company's values and company's mission. So there should be an equilibrium between external orientation and internal orientation. I don't say that the external factor, macro and micro factor, are not important, but there should be also a focus on internal aspect. And also I observe that in some cases these companies foster a very important fear of making mistakes. And why this is so bad? Because in the book I included two main chapters on innovation and creativity. You cannot be creative and innovative without making mistakes. So this is that most of the companies that are very innovative, some of them I mentioned in the book, even they reward when people make mistakes. They give an award for the best mistake and so on. Why? Because mistakes are the raw material for creativity and innovation. It's very unlikely that you have the best idea for the innovative product or the best version or model of this product immediately. These are things that are in progress. Trial and error, we test new material, prototypes, we test different packaging, different colors, different function. We have focus group, we interview customers and so on. But it's very unlikely that, and this is a process of iteration, means that you learn from the previous model and so on, then you introduce. If there is a very widespread fear of making mistakes, how you can innovate? And people try to do things in a very traditional way. And they cannot be adapted to the new trends, new technological trends, new economic trends, new market trends. So this means that companies should eliminate this pocket of fear. This is the first step, but then the second step is foster an environment of compassion. How we can put this on a practical way? Are there any policies that are people-oriented? For example, does this company have free counseling services for people that have mental health problems? I observe that some companies provide with these services free. You can say, but it represents a cost for the company. No, it's not a cost. It's an investment in employees' well-being. And when employees is treated in a very supportive way, they are more prone to be productive, innovative, creative, connected to other, cooperative. But if you care only for their function, how they perform, how they, for example, meet the goals. Another policy that the company can implement is, are managers providing with compassionate feedback? I wrote a very interesting article of the importance of compassionate feedback. Most of the feedback during an employee appraisal process is fear-based. Employees in some cases are feeling threatened. I will receive a nagging from this manager. They will tell me what I did wrong. I feel helpless, resourceless, and so on. Instead, compassionate feedback doesn't focus on the mistakes. They focus on what can be changed for the future. Doesn't focus so much on the past. We can learn from the past, but has a future orientation. This means that we want to do things better in the future. And here, as a company, as a manager, we try to provide you with tools. For example, mentoring, coaching, training on the job, and we will try to accompany you during the change process so that you don't feel on your own, you feel supported, and so on. So these are a few examples of policies that are that need to be introduced. And many companies don't do this because they represent costs instead of considering this as an investment.
And Dr. Bruno, that reminds me once again of the Japanese concept of Kaizen or continuous improvement. So those organizations do very well competitively. Now, as a consultant, Dr. Bruno, who is the perfect client for you? So if there's a CEO watching this video right now, what type of companies do you really enjoy working with?
I enjoy companies that have challenge because they're acting in a traditional way. This means mostly profit-oriented, but they have a bit of open-mindedness, because if the company has a challenge, but they are not even aware of the challenge, or they are not acknowledging that there is a challenge, and this is affecting not only the relationship with the stakeholder, but their productivity going down, their sales going down, lot of negative review from customers and so on. They do not recognize this, means being mindful of the current state and where we want to arrive. Future state, better state means much more human-oriented. It's very difficult because it's very difficult to break this cycle of resistance to a new paradigm, a completely new paradigm. I like companies that have challenges in a way. All type of companies, I advise companies, different sizes and different sectors, and some of them are non-profit organizations, but they recognize this challenge, but at least they're slightly open, at least slightly, to new ways of doing business. This means there is not only a strict, unique way to do business with profit orientation, with only focusing on what I call quantitative aspect of business, what can be measured, such as profit, market share, productivity, but also they're more oriented to work on what I call qualitative aspect of business. What are qualitative aspect of business? They cannot be measured precisely or in a very accurate way, but there are some factors such as compassion, care, generosity, gratitude, and others. So when companies understand that relationship in business are the building brick of any business success, of better reputation, better brand image, much more loyalty from customers, when they really understand, even they are not there yet, these are the clients that I enjoy a lot, not only from the economic perspective, but make the work much more meaningful, because you see the change from the original state that was very dry company, very rigid, and a company that is much more alive. A company that's more alive and bring about positive effect within the company and outside the company.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bruno. What is the best way? And of course, we've got your main link in the description already for this video because we're live on YouTube. Is there any other specific way you want people to connect with you? LinkedIn, obviously.
They can connect through LinkedIn, and if they're interested in this type of ideas, they can check the Art of Compassionate Business, the book that is in its second edition, white cover, published by Routledge, and they can find this book online or offline, and they can follow me on LinkedIn. I generally post some interviews and articles on topics related to compassionate business.